Alliance. Today I'll be talking to you about managing a successful food scrap diversion program at rental properties while adhering to the guidelines of Vermont state laws. If you have a question as I speak, feel free to click on the Q&A or chat button at the bottom of your screen. And all the materials and websites mentioned will be included along with a recording of this webinar, either in a follow-up email from Kim, or we'll also post it on our YouTube channel. So all of the website links and documents will be in a PDF link in the comments section. So let's get started. Many of you are hearing about the Alliance for the first time today, so I'm going to give you a little background. The Alliance was formed in 2015 to assist participating towns in reducing solid waste disposed in landfills while reducing the amount of waste generated, conserve resources, and promote recycling and reuse. The Alliance provides education and outreach to businesses, schools, and residents to achieve the Alliance's goals to reduce the amount of material people in our service area send to the landfill while increasing the amount of material diverted from landfills for recycling and reuse. The Alliance is made up of 13 towns: Arlington, Bennington, Dorset, Glastonbury, Manchester, Pownell, Rupert, Sandgate, Searsburg, Shaftesbury, Stamford, Sunderland, and Woodford. The towns of Peru, Reedsboro, Londonderry, Landgrove, and Winhall, while in Bennington County, are not members of the Alliance. All of the businesses, residents, schools, and organizations located within the service the Alliance provides includes solid waste audits, where we visit businesses and review waste management practices while offering technical assistance to manage their solid waste. This can include a review of current recycling laws and providing sources to recycle items banned from the landfill, as well as provide communication pieces for staff about how to recycle properly and suggest ways to lower their solid waste hauling costs. We host household hazardous waste collection events throughout the summer months in several towns. In fact, we're going to increase the number of events we do next year. And this service is also available to small businesses if they pre-register with us, which is less expensive than doing a dedicated hazardous waste pickup at their company location. We provide source information for disposal of banned items such as computers, fluorescent bulbs, batteries, architectural paint, and the like. We also do community outreach like we're doing today through presentations to groups and the public about recycling, composting, and waste reduction. Nearly half of all the waste we produce globally is either organic or biodegradable. When sent to a landfill and allowed to degrade anaerobically, that's without the presence of oxygen, methane is produced, which is 30 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. The increases in greenhouse gas emissions are responsible for our climate change. So when we reduce the amount of waste we generate, we reduce the need for additional landfill space while reducing our carbon footprint. Vermont's Universal Recycling Law adopted a food recovery hierarchy into law in 2012 to draw attention to our use of uneaten food and help guide consumers into making the highest and best use of their food. The most preferred method being source reduction, followed by food for people, then animals, then composting. When we reduce our consumption of food and thereby reduce the amount of food scraps generated in the first place by shopping smarter, strategically planning meals with the foods of what we have on hand, less of our food goes to waste. When we do have leftover food, our first priority is to give it to people first through food pantries and other organizations. When we have lower quality food waste, we share that with animals and other agricultural uses. Any leftover food at this point should be composted or used in anaerobic digestion. In 2014, Vermont began requiring food scrap generators like grocery stores, universities, and large hospitals to divert their food scraps from landfills to certified facilities. Now, as of July 1st of this year, smaller generators, including residents, are now required to divert their food scraps. So that's everybody. This requires all residents to adjust the ways in which food is disposed of in a healthful manner while complying with Vermont's Rental Housing Health Code. I'll spend a few minutes here explaining the details of those requirements. If no food diversion program currently exists on a property, the first step is to determine which method of removal of food scraps suits the location best, which can be done in a variety of ways. As you decide on which method of collection and disposal to use, consider that some tenants don't drive, or there may be insufficient space to manage scraps on site. The landlord can subscribe to a food scrap pickup service for tenants. If the landlord is already receiving trash and single stream recycling on site for tenants through a commercial hauler, the hauler may also provide food scrap collection. The law gets a little murky here, as haulers are only required to offer pickup of food scraps from commercial accounts and residential addresses with 4 or more units. If, however, where you live has fewer than 4 units and is already receiving trash pickup from a hauler, that hauler may be willing to offer food scrap collection service. Many of the larger haulers are expanding their service, and newer companies are coming onto the market throughout Vermont to meet the increased demand for this service. Another option is to ensure tenants bring food scraps to a drop-off location, such as a transfer station, farm, or community composting facility. Yet another option is to set up a backyard composting system or solar digesters for tenants. And finally, landlords can have tenants make independent plans of their own to manage their food scraps separate of their trash and recycling. Regardless of which options I've mentioned is chosen, in addition to trash and recycling bins, a landlord must provide durable and watertight receptacles for food scraps that are stored outside until they are either hauled away, brought to a drop-off, or composted. A properly managed compost bin or solar digester fulfills this requirement. Tenants may also take their scraps directly to these receptacles instead of placing them in another collection bin, as is typically done when the food scraps are picked up by a hauler. Nor is an outside container required if tenants are taking their scraps themselves directly from the kitchen to a drop-off, such as a farm, community compost facility, or transfer station. Landlords are not required to provide kitchen containers, but some may provide these to encourage good food scrap management habits. When commercial haulers provide food scrap collection, they are typically providing containers, either rolling carts similar to trash and recycling carts, to store outside or within a shed or garage. If the hauler does not provide a container while the scraps are stored outside, the landlord must provide that receptacle. If the landlord is coordinating drop-offs, say to a transfer station, although not required to be provided by the landlord, 2 to 5 gallon buckets with lids, like you see here in the picture, work well for each unit's food scraps. For backyard composting, if someone is willing to actively manage the bin or piles, landlords can install backyard compost bins or can install solar digesters. The latter do not require much maintenance when set up properly and may only need to be emptied every few years. If you have a hauler picking up your trash and recycling, they may offer food scrap collection. When using a hauler, it's important to manage odors and pests around food scraps prior to pickup and require adding carbons, or browns as they're known, such as sawdust, mulch, wood shavings, leaves, shredded newspaper, coffee grounds, and other organic matter on top of the food scraps stored in the tote or bin. This is done by either tenants or a property manager. Commercial haulers may provide an additional tote containing the wood pulp or sawdust, which tenants would use to apply on top of the food scraps. So you'll need to make sure your collection location has enough space for the additional bins. The amount of sawdust or other browns, as I mentioned, added on top of the food scraps will vary with the temperature and how full your bin is with food scraps. In the summer months, you may need to add 2 to 6 inches of the browns, particularly to full bins, to keep maggots and flies at bay, and much less during winter months when there are fewer pests. Packing the sawdust down with a handheld garden tool will also help control pests and maximize space in the bin between pickups. If you're dropping off food scraps at a transfer station, you want to make sure you're aware of the hours and fees charged, and to keep in mind the health code requires that trash, recyclables, and food scraps need to be removed from dwellings not less than once a week. Most haulers and drop-off locations accept all food scraps, including meat and bones, fats, oils, coffee grounds, and filters and spoiled food. It's important to have tenants understand what goes into the bins or collection buckets is just organic matter. No produce sticky labels, wrappings, or plastic bags should be used to line a kitchen compost bin or transport scraps from the kitchen to a common area are permitted. Plastic bags do not break down during the composting process and must be sorted out at the landfill or composting site. Most haulers and drop-off locations, pardon me, most haulers only accept bags that are labeled BPI certified and compostable, but check with the hauler before implementing them in any collection program. On a side note, compostable bags can be used as a bucket liner, but also can be very expensive, particularly over the long period of time, and their quality can vary widely. A less expensive method may be to line a small bucket with newspaper and wash the bucket out once emptied into the larger collection tote. Hardware stores and online bulk wholesalers sell buckets with lids. Some restaurants, bakeries, grocery stores, and food manufacturers end up with extra buckets on hand that they can give away for free. You can also check websites like FreeCycle or networks like Front Porch Forum, where they sometimes are advertised. If there are just a few residential units, composting food scraps in the backyard can be an easy solution if you or your tenants are willing to actively manage the piles through the year. Compost bins can be made out of a variety of materials, but plastic compost bins purchased at hardware stores or through the Alliance during warmer months at scheduled sales that we have can be an economical and easy way to get started. Tenants composting in the backyard should remember that leftover meat and bones should be placed in the trash rather than the compost bin, as their composting system won't reach a temperature high enough to properly break down the animal material and can attract unwanted animals. The key to managing a successful compost system is understand the techniques for proper breakdown to keep animals away and maintain healthy sanitary conditions on your property. University of Vermont's Extension has a master composting course I highly recommend that's done online twice a year, and the state of Vermont has resources as well for successful composting. A solar digester is also a good solution if you don't have use for the finished compost and just want to break down the food scraps. A solar digester will break down all food scraps, including meat, bones, and animal waste. While a lot more expensive up front, it requires less looking after once the system is set up than a composting system. In either case, it's important to understand or know your size of your system to be sufficient to serve the number of units you have. Vermont has seen an increase in human-bear interactions, so it's important to take a few steps to discourage bears and to manage your compost so it doesn't attract animals. Take down bird feeders during non-winter months. Use 3 times as many browns as greens in your compost bin to minimize smell and to speed up the composting process. And regularly turn your compost pile so the materials break down more quickly. If bear activity persists, check with your neighbors to see if their bird feeders are up or other food sources attracting the animals. More information about composting and resources to address animal issues can be found in a booklet entitled The Dirt on Compost, which is distributed by the Vermont DEC. For any food scrap diversion program to be successful, communication and understanding of the process is key. It's important to understand what food scraps are and how they're going to be collected in the dwelling and brought to the central collection area or backyard system. A receptacle, such as a bucket you see here pictured with a lid, is to collect the food scraps in the kitchen and later take them to the collection bin outside. It is important to understand the collection schedule so that you understand when it's going to be sent out to the curbside or central location and picked up by your hauler. The state of Vermont has a downloadable bin signs you can laminate you see here on your right. They'll give you proper identification and sorting of food scraps, recycling, and trash, as well as instructions for setting up a composting system. Your hauler also, likely if it's a large enough hauler, will have signs for easy sorting of items. Large residential facilities have noted success when having a tenant within the complex to act as a guide, an influencer, if you will, to help other fellow tenants understand proper sorting and upkeep of the waste sorting area. If you empty your kitchen container at least weekly, keep a lid on it, and wash it when it is empty, you will probably not have issues with smell. If you notice a smell, empty it more often or cover your scraps with a handful or two of sawdust, wood shavings, dry leaves, or other plant material, or even newspapers to contain odors. Put some in the bottom of the container as well to absorb liquids and make the container easier to clean. Whether you compost or not, fruit flies do appear in the summer. To make a fly trap, pour a splash of sweet liquid like red wine vinegar or old wine in a jar, add a couple of drops of dish soap, and make a funnel from a piece of paper or cardstock. Set the funnel in the jar and put the jar next to your food scrap container. Make another one to keep by your fruit. Another way to reduce the hatching of new flies is to be sure to thoroughly wash fruit when you bring it home prior to placing it on the counter when ripening. Keeping the central collection totes clean is important. To control maggots in warmer months, clean food scrap totes after they are picked up and emptied, or ask your hauler to swap clean empty totes for full ones. Make sure the lid stays securely closed on the totes, and if necessary, use clamps or bungee cords. If the outside of the totes are getting sticky and have residue, they should get cleaned up to help defray fly attraction. And when possible, try hanging fly tapes near to catch them before they can lay eggs. Ask your hauler or composter first if this is acceptable, but you may want to try using lime wood ash, only if ash is completely cooled and has no embers. You also may try salt, diatomaceous earth. Finally, the last two options are less desirable as they don't work as well and add moisture, which is heavy and maggots like the moisture. And that would be vinegar, such as white vinegar splashing out the inside, or use hot boiling water sparingly on the totes. It's important to put the whole process in perspective. When everyone understands that most of what we are throwing away isn't really trash, but a marketable commodity with a monetary value on items such as paper, aluminum, cardboard, glass, tin, plastic, and now food scraps, our behavior about sorting items and making sure items are clean and dry and uncontaminated changes. Everyone's efforts of doing proper diverting of food scraps will pay off as the bins will start looking cleaner and smell less, and we know we've done our part to reduce our carbon footprint. Now, if you aren't really thinking about that, then at least you'll notice that it doesn't smell as much. So to recap, there are a variety of options to arrange the removal of food scraps from your home. The landlord can subscribe to a pickup service where available for tenants such as a hauler, or ensure tenants bring food scraps to a drop-off, farm, or transfer station. Tenants with their landlord can set up a backyard compost system or solar digester, or make an independent plan to manage food scraps, separate from the trash. Vermont law requires haulers to collect food scraps from commercial accounts and residential addresses of 4 or more units, but haulers may offer the service to addresses with fewer than 4 units. A landlord must provide durable and watertight receptacles for food scraps that are stored outside until they are hauled away, brought to a drop-off, or composted. The exception is when food scraps are brought directly to a backyard compost system or solar digester. A hauler may provide the receptacle, such as a bin or tote, in the common area for collection of everyone's food scraps. If none is provided, the landlord must provide the receptacle. Most food haulers accept all food scraps, including meat, bones, fats, oils, coffee grounds, and filters and spoiled food. All food scraps picked up by haulers or composted on site must be free of labels and bags. The exception is the hauler permitting bags that are BPI certified compostable bags. Landlords need to allow enough space for the additional bins required to collect food scraps and store sawdust browns to put on top of the food scraps, as well as supply adequate signing and information about the waste management program in place. Tenants composting on site may discard their meat and bones in the trash since composting bins do not reach temperatures high enough to ensure proper breakdown and to avoid attracting animals and pests. Tenants using solar digesters may add meat, bones, and animal waste to their systems. Proper education and signing will go a long way to a successful waste management system. Partnering with a tenant on site to help educate and communicate correct sorting ensures highest and best use of all recyclable materials. As an added point or two, not previously mentioned, we encourage larger properties especially to consider offering the separating of banned items from the trash, such as electronics or e-waste, be held separately and brought to the transfer station. It doesn't take a lot of time or space, but it spares precious elements that can be recycled and potentially combustible components, such as lithium batteries, from being landfilled and known to start fires. These items can be taken to the transfer station and recycled in a safe manner. In addition, architectural paint, still in liquid form, that may be collecting on site can be dropped off for recycling at several area retailers in quantities of up to 5 gallons a day in its original container. Any paint that has hardened should be disposed of in the trash. And finally, we'd like to remind folks that hazardous waste, that includes things like chemicals, pesticides, paints, and mercury-containing items such as fluorescent bulbs, thermometers, thermostats, and alkaline and rechargeable batteries can be dropped off during our household hazardous waste collection events held during warmer months of the year. Follow us on Facebook or see our ads in the Vermont News Guide for scheduled dates and locations. Thank you for the time to view this presentation. I'll now answer any questions, and I also will leave my contact information up here. And this is also Michael Batcher, who is the program manager of the Bennington County Solid Waste Alliance.
I have a question. If you do home composting, what do you do with bone? I mean, I don't put any meat or bones. What do you do with those then? Or do you have to do a separate one, a separate bin for the hauler to take?
No, they can just go in the trash with your regular trash. They'll just, that's the exception to the rule because they realized you can't possibly break them down in your home compost bin.
Okay, I'm sure you said that.
I threw a lot out there.
Oh, go ahead.
How does a solar digester work?
Essentially what it is you have something that looks like a laundry basket sitting upright that gets submerged under, you dig a hole and submerge that underground. And then you'll put in some starter enzyme that comes with the solar digester initially. And then the cone that you saw in the photograph sits on top and a lid. And you're going to put the material in there, the food scraps, that mixes up with the enzyme that you put in there. And it essentially leaches down underground through the soil and just becomes soil amendment on its own through decomposition with the work of the enzymes. And it works for probably 2 or 3 years before you have to add another packet of enzymes. You may not even need to. It just depends on how much you're sending down there, that kind of thing.
Do I understand that you can put meat scraps in it?
Yes, meat scraps, bones, as well as small animal feces, you know, pet cat and dog feces.
And why don't the bears get into it?
Because the smell is generated underground usually, so it doesn't really emit the odors that a composting pile can, or a composting bin that doesn't get, you know, enough attention.
Okay.
I have a question. What can be put in the kitchen buckets to cut down on smell if people are not able to take it out to the garbage, to the bin every day?
Well, keeping the lid on it is a good idea for starters because you're just getting it less oxygen. It's basically just emptying it, you know, a week at a time or less if you can. It usually, I mean, there's some units that do have charcoal filters that you can purchase, kitchen buckets that are in the lid that help control some of the odor if you want to get a little fancier about that. But, you know, some people, they throw a little baking soda on it. They throw, you know, just keep a little bit of another bucket of wood pulp, like wood shavings, to put on top that also quell some of the odor.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Okay,
Keeping it washed out regularly, that helps.
yeah.
Well, can you talk at all about vermicompost, vermiculture? Do you have any experience with that?
I haven't run it myself. I am familiar with it. Essentially, vermiculture is using the red worms, wigglers as they're called, and you mix them in with shredded newspaper, and you put them together. So like one half of the bin is going to have the shredded newspaper and the worms, and the other half is going to have your food scraps, and they eventually kind of work together. It is a phenomenal sight to watch because it is neat how they create. Essentially, they're eating all the scraps, and their waste is what the byproduct is that comes from it. You can use like a Rubbermaid 21 quart tote kind of size that is light blocking. You can use it inside a pantry or a closet year round. Actually, I know some apartment dwellers that use it. You want to make sure that it doesn't get too cold. They do tend to slow down as the temperature drops, but they are things that work year round. So if you're confined with space and don't have a backyard, that's another way to do that.
Do want to mention everybody attending today will get one of these kitchen buckets that Paula dropped off today. So I'll make arrangements for people to get those. What else? I had another question. For those composting bags, can they be thrown in the buckets until they go outside to a bin?
Yes, but check with your hauler first. Most of them will accept it, but don't assume that they do just because they're compostable. It just depends on how they are managing the food scrap breakdown. I mean, most of the large operations do, but I don't assume. Call the hauler first to say yes, they will. I know, speaking with Casella, they take the bags as long as they say BPI certified compostable. If they say biodegradable, that is not the same thing whatsoever. It will not break down in the time frame they have to work with to get material ready for composting, and it ends up just being contaminant. And at some point, I know haulers will, if they get too much contaminant in a load, meaning food scraps that aren't really food scraps but are filled with plastic bags and that sort of thing, they may refuse to pick it up, and then it becomes the owner's problem, you know, because they're not obligated, because they have to abide by the law by bringing what is actually compostable material to the compost facility. And if they're bringing stuff that's not compostable, it's waste, and they'll either charge it to you as waste or refuse to pick it up, because they are required by law to comply as well.
You know what the average cost is for a resident to have their scraps picked up?
I don't, because right now the law does not require individual residents to receive curbside service. So most haulers are not offering it individual addresses. That's why I mentioned if it's a commercial address and it's 4 units or more, they are required by law to provide the service.
Right.
There's like a similar situation with condominium owners. They may all be clustered together in a tightly knit group that looks like an apartment complex, but they are considered by law to be separate residential addresses.
Oh.
So there is no service ultimately required to be given to them. Now, commercial, accounts may be established on these properties in which there's a central location for collection, and a hauler may negotiate with the condominium HOA to be able to do the pickup as a commercial account without doing the individual pickup and then, at each doorstep. It's just a matter of how that works. But there are lots of, I would say, smaller micro businesses starting up, not a huge amount in southern Vermont right now, but there are more every day that I'm hearing about. And I just try to get people to tell me, if you hear of some small company, it's a guy maybe with a pickup truck, but he's paid his registration fees and he's a bona fide hauler and he's offering food scrap collection service at the curb, I try to get the word out, because it is definitely a service that's needed for folks that don't want to schlep their food scraps to the transfer station and don't have a means by which to compost in their backyard.
Yeah. Pat, is your area doing any food scrapping yet? Do you know? Have the property manager set up anything yet?
Not that I know of. I haven't gotten any kind of a notification, and I think they would have if anything was set up.
Yeah, they would. Yeah. Okay. I was just curious because I hadn't heard if they were or not.
No, I hadn't either, unless I missed it.
Yeah.
I'm happy to meet with any of them as a group to do a similar type of presentation to help them understand what their options are, to give them, the best individual service that they need. I mean, it's individual in that sense, because every property has got a different size, a different layout, and arrangement with their hauler, if they're using a hauler, assuming.
Yeah. And I think you've reached out to them already.
Yeah, I have, but I will keep at it because it's the law and I'm trying to get everybody in compliance. I'm not an enforcer. I'm just here to give out information, but my job is to try to reach out to everybody to help them, give informed decision-making.
Yep. I don't think I have any other questions. Does anybody else?
I have a quick question, and you probably did say this. With the home composting, and you say you need sawdust, but you said brown, so you can use leaves and grass instead?
Absolutely. Well, okay. Grass, if it's completely dried out, becomes a brown. If it's green, it's considered a nitrogen source. So you can use dried leaves, dried grass. I would stick away from things that are like if you're doing clear out of invasive species, I wouldn't mess with that, or things that have a lot of seeds, because you can get stray sprouting and things that go on that just kind of mess up with your things. So you're sticking with newspaper, coffee filters, shredded. Some people do shredded office paper if there isn't much ink on it, that kind of thing.
Good idea. I do that all the time. So I got that.
Yeah, don't make it your sole source, but you can mix it in there with other things, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Paula?
Yes.
Did you say that they have to give us shavings if we're like a large community, that the owners are supposed to give us that?
Well, when you say they, you mean the hauler or the property owner?
No, the property owner. Is that part of their responsibility?
No, it isn't their responsibility per se, but it's going to make life much easier, because it's going to tamp down the amount of insects and maggots, invasive, other animals coming by the thing, because it's going to control odors, and it's in their best interest to do it, and it's cheap. I mean, wood pine shavings come in a big, 3 cubic foot, 3-yard thing, and it's not a big deal usually.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing they're required to do is provide the collection tote if a hauler does not. They're required by law to give that, and they're required to have it emptied at least once a week.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So over at the Corby, they have a bin that they, the residents are putting the food scraps into. And then there's another bin next to it that has the shavings. And so, each time you put in some food, you put the shavings on top of it to cut down on the smell. And then it locks up. So that's probably what they would do up there as well.
Sounds good, yeah.
They should probably have a key to it so that people from outside won't be coming in to use our shavings. Because I see lots of people from the outside use our trash.
Really?
And the big one?
Oh, wow.
I mean, maybe they're people that should be here, but at night I see lots of cars pull up, throw things in the dumpster.
Wow. Yeah. Huh. Surprised they haven't put a camera up to see.
Well, they do have cameras here, but I don't know if it's directed that way.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe they are people that are supposed to, but it seems funny at night.
Mm. All right, anybody else? Okay, well, I want to thank Paula from the Bennington County Solid Waste Alliance for coming and doing this presentation. And I hope that everybody has gotten some new information that will help them out. And
My pleasure. Please don't hesitate to give me a call if at your location you have any other further questions as you work through the process. Or if you know an organization or group of people that need further help, I'm happy to make a similar presentation for them as well.
great. And did you say you would have some handouts that I can get out to people?
Yes, I'm going to send you later on an email today of the links to all of the either PDF files or websites for future reference to
Okay.
just clarify further the points I made.
All right, and I'll put those in everybody's bucket. So when I deliver those, they'll have them right there.
Fantastic.
All right,
Thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you. That
Paul.
was very